Hi everybody, this is Judy at Judy in the Kitchen. I have some help for you if you have accidentally over-salted some food. We've all done it from time to time. Please don't throw that food away. There might be a way to rescue it, and you don't want to toss out food that you can possibly salvage. So here are some tips that I've got for you. First of all, you can add more liquid to your food. Let's say it's a soup or a sauce of some sort or some other liquidy food that you're working with, and you taste it and you find that there's way too much salt in there. All you need to do is add some more liquid to it. Taste it until you know that the salt is right. Then you may need to add some of your other flavorings that you had in there to help compensate for that added liquid. Not a hard fix. You may wind up with more sauce or soup than what you intended, but at least you've saved it. Another thing to try would be to just simply increase the recipe, except for the salt. Let's say you're making a stew and you found that it's just too salty. Try adding more vegetables to it, maybe some more meat that you have browned. Something like that will help to compensate. In that case, you may also need to add a little bit more liquid to it. Make sure it's not a salty liquid, and by doing all that, it will help to compensate and bring that level of salt down. Now, what if you're preparing a meat, you haven't cooked it yet, you're seasoning it, and all of a sudden you realize you've just overdone it on the salt? That's an easy fix. Take it to the sink, just rinse it off, pat it dry with a paper towel, and start over. Now, what if the meat has been cooked and you taste it and it's all done, it looks wonderful, and it's like, too salty? There is a way you can possibly salvage this. Create some sort of a topping, a sauce or a topping of some sort to go on that meat, and hopefully that topping would normally have a little bit of salt added to it. Leave the salt out, smother the meat with it, and hopefully the two will balance each other out so you've got the right amount of salt in your dish and not an oversalted meat that's not very palatable. This same principle would apply if you've oversalted a main dish. Let's say you've cooked a casserole, it's all finished, you taste it and like, oh no, it's too salty. Do the same thing. You could create a topping or a sauce of some sort that will go on top. Leave the salt out of that topping for sure, and smother that casserole with it, and between the two, the seasonings should hopefully balance each other out. Another thing that you could try is adding a little bit of acid to your dish. Some vinegar or lemon juice. This works well with liquidy items or soups or sauces, even vegetables that you may have oversalted. Just add a little bit. It does not need to be a lot, but just a little bit, and that will help to counterbalance and mask some of that saltiness. The same principle applies with a little bit of sugar. Now you could use white sugar, brown sugar, molasses, honey, maple syrup, agave nectar, any type of sweetener that you have on hand that might work well with the dish that you're using. Now again, you don't want to add so much sugar that you turn a main dish into a dessert. You just want just a little bit, and that will help to counterbalance some of that extra saltiness that is in that food. You could also transform a food into a cream-based dish. Let's say, for instance, you're cooking a tomato soup and you taste it and, ooh, no, you've added too much salt. Well, you could just add some milk of your choice or some cream to it and turn it into cream of tomato soup. And by adding the extra liquid, it will dilute that salt as well, and you may want to add some of the other herbs and spices along the way to balance that out. But by not adding any more salt and adding liquid or cream, it will help to dilute that extra saltiness that's in there. Now, what about adding a potato to a dish? Some resources say that that works, and some resources say that that doesn't work. Well, I have some ideas on this. Let's say you fixed a casserole or a stew and it's got potatoes in there, especially a stew, you could just cut up some more potato, just like you were adding some more vegetables to it, and don't add any more salt for sure, but just add that same prepared type of potato to your food. You may need to add some more liquid to it. Make sure it's unsalted. You may want to add some more of your other herbs and seasonings in there. No salt for sure. And that can help to counterbalance the extra salt. Now, what if you're cooking something that does not call for potato? Let's say back to the tomato soup, for instance, or even chicken soup, and you've over-salted it. You could take a whole potato, wash it really well, don't peel it, leave it whole, add it to your soup or stew, your tomato soup or your chicken soup or something like that, and allow that potato to cook in there until it's completely cooked. Then take it out and do what you want with that potato. But that potato will have absorbed some of that salty liquid that's in there. To compensate, you may need to add a little bit more liquid back to the pot to compensate for what the potato absorbed. But in the process of cooking it, it will have absorbed some of that salty liquid, thereby removing some of the salt along the way. Now, it may not be enough to compensate for the over saltiness, and then again it may. Depends on what you've got and how much it's over salted. But it is worth a try like that at any rate. Now, what if you've purchased a food and you found that it's way too salty, like some hams are very salty, and maybe some pack of bacon is very salty, or maybe you have salt pork that you want to use, but it's got more salt in it than what you want. Just simply put it in a pot and soak it in some water, and that salt will leach out into the water, and then you can pat your food dry and proceed from there. If you're going to soak it for an extended period of time, and I would suggest you soak it at least an hour, depending upon the size of, let's say, a ham, put it in the refrigerator to make sure that you're doing something that's food safe and it's not going to spoil sitting out at room temperature. But once you've soaked it, discard the water, pat it dry with a paper towel, and go from there. I also have a few tips for you on how to avoid this problem in the first place. For one thing, if you're going to measure salt, like pouring it into a teaspoon measuring spoon, don't do it over your pot or your bowl that your food is already in, because if you over pour, that extra is going to go right in there, and hence you've already over salted it. Don't do that. Pour it away from your food vessel and then move that spoon over into it, and that will avoid that problem. Another thing, if you're using a salt shaker, you want to check that lid first. Make sure it's good and tight on there before you turn that salt shaker upside down, or else you may have a terrible surprise to deal with. You also want to consider other ingredients that you might be adding to your food, like capers or anchovies or soy sauce or fish sauce or even butter. Those items have salt in them, or salted butter would have salt in them. If you notice, a lot of professional chefs insist on using unsalted butter. Why? Different brands of butter, salted butter, will have different amounts of salt in them. And by using unsalted butter, they can control the amount of salt that's in a dish most accurately. So you don't have to use salted butter, but if you do choose to use it, be aware that it's got salt in there, and be careful about adding salt before you taste it. You'd want to make sure you cook it first. Another tip would be to just simply use less seasoning at the beginning. Let your food cook for a little bit, and then give it a taste, and adjust your seasonings and your salt and so forth as you go. And that way you're being a little more careful about how much salt and other seasonings you add, and that way you hopefully won't overdo it along the way. Well, I do hope that this helps. If you have some tips and suggestions that you'd like to add along the way, let me know in the comments section below. It's good to share with others. This is Judi at Judi in the Kitchen. Bye for now.